Hi everyone. Today's topic is about the negative thoughts that you have in your head, that critical voice that speaks to you sometimes throughout the day or at least on a daily basis. These critical thoughts are not facts. These negative thoughts try to convince your brain that they're true. I want to talk to you about 3 steps you can take to take back the power that this voice has in your head and in your life. The first step is hearing the critical voice, being aware of that voice in your head. Sometimes this critical voice can say things like, you are not strong enough. You are not smart enough. You are not brave enough. You are not, and fill in that blank with what you've heard. What you've heard that tries to convince you you're not enough as a woman, as a wife, as a mom, as a daughter, as a friend, as an employee, as someone who lives on this earth and does various things, responsibilities, activities day to day. Maybe that critical voice says, you made a big mistake. Maybe that critical voice says, you'll never succeed. Maybe it's another voice that says something about never being able to do something. You'll never get that promotion. You'll never spend enough time with your kids. What does your critical voice say? I want you to think about that right now. Each of us are unique, but each of us experience times in our days, in our weeks, where we hear negative thoughts in our head. So step 1, you hear the critical voice. Step 2, become curious. Here are some questions that I want you to think about as you become curious with regards to that negative thought or critical voice that you hear so often. How does that critical voice make you feel? Does it make you feel small? Does it make you feel scared? Does it make you feel defeated or depleted or not enough? How does it make you feel? Next, think about how intense that voice is. How strongly do you hear that voice in your head? Is it once a day? Is it 5 times a day? Is it hundreds of times a day that you hear that voice? And how much of an influence does it have in your life? How intense is it? Are you able to hear that voice and move on with your day? Or do you hear that voice and create a loop where you're stuck in that negative thought pattern and it begins to impact how you go about your day? And it begins to impact your mood. So the voice you just heard, think about that last critical negative thought that you had. What area of life is it about? Is it about your parenting? Is it about you being a wife? Is it about your career? Is it about your home life with regards to clutter or messes or chaos? Is it about family? Is it about relationships? Is it about finances? What area of your life could you tag that thought about? What area of life is it? Next, in what area of life is your critical voice the loudest? So maybe you have hundreds of negative thoughts a day, and they're about various areas of your life. Can you think about which area of your life you hear that critical voice the most? Do you hear that critical voice about your parenting? You're not a good enough mom, you don't spend enough time with your kids, you overreact. Is this critical voice that you hear in your head, is it mostly about parenting? Is it mostly about your career? Is it mostly about your finances? What area of life do you hear the critical voice the most? Think about that as you go about your day to day. Can you determine one area of life that you hear the critical voice the most? Next question I want you to ask yourself is, how long has that critical voice been a part of you? I know mine has been a part of my life for a very long time, and maybe you can relate. Has that critical voice been inside you since you were little, and it's grown stronger and stronger as the years pass? Has that critical voice just shown up recently, maybe in a new season of life that you're in? Maybe you're a new mom. Maybe you just started a new job. Maybe your family moved to a new state. How long has your critical voice been in your life? Next, I want you to think about how often you hear the critical voice. We thought about what area of life it's about. Now let's think about how often do you hear it. So you may hear it 5 times and it's super intense during a day, or you may hear it hundreds of times. Think about how often your mind goes to a negative thought in the course of 24 hours. Can you do that for me? Think about how often. Now think about the voice you hear in your head. Is it your voice beating yourself up, tearing yourself down? Is it your voice? Or do you hear the voice of someone else? Do you hear a voice of a family member? Do you hear the voice of someone in your workplace? Do you hear the voice of someone from childhood? What voice, whose voice do you hear most often when that critical negative thought plays out in your mind? So, step 2 is to become curious. Step 1, hear the critical voice. Step 2, become curious. Let's talk about step 3. Step 3 is to ask yourself what if questions. What if the critical voice in your head is just a small part of you who is scared? That small part of you who is scared to fail. That critical voice who's saying you're not enough and you're never going to be enough. Maybe that voice is a part of you who is scared to fail and afraid to move forward. Maybe that voice is afraid of failing again with something that you didn't succeed on in the past. And maybe that critical voice is just trying to protect you. What if, instead of fighting that critical voice in your head, constantly trying to get rid of it and not even pay attention to it, what if you became curious, like in step number 2, and you began to show love and compassion to that voice? That voice who's a part of you who may be scared. What if you showed love and compassion to that thought, to that critical voice that you hear on a daily basis? What if you showed love and compassion for this part of you who is just trying to help, trying to protect you and keep you safe? Might not be what's best for you, but that critical voice is just trying to protect you. So what if you showed it love and compassion the next time that critical voice is in your head? What if, in the moment that you hear the critical voice, you recognize that critical voice as an opportune time to show yourself more kindness and grace? I don't know about you, but I have had a history of beating myself up over what ends up being very minute things. Beating myself up over making a mistake. Beating myself up over not doing it, quote unquote, right. So what if the moment that you notice that negative, critical voice that is truly telling you that you're not enough, what if you showed yourself more kindness and grace? Because that part of you is trying to protect you and keep you from failing. But in turn, it may be holding you back from a life you can't even dream of. So show yourself, when you hear that critical voice, show yourself some grace. Give yourself permission to feel sad or frustrated or scared. Give yourself permission to feel these feelings that happen based on happenings in our day-to-day, and then move forward with self-love and self-compassion and grace on a daily basis. So maybe you're continually getting caught up in those negative thoughts. You have the negative thought and it swirls. You start asking yourself more negative questions. Am I not good enough? Do I not have the skills to succeed? And take a moment and take a deep breath. That's what I do when I think about these what ifs. I'm thinking about what if I showed myself a little grace in this moment? Because these negative thoughts and critical voices are coming from a place of fear. So many times the negativity that we have in our head is rooted in fear. And so say, it's okay to be afraid. It's absolutely okay to be afraid. But tell yourself, I'm not going to let this fear stop me from taking my next move, from taking a leap of faith and doing something new, from taking that next step in your life that you know will help you be the best version of yourself. Someone who's confident and someone who knows that they can succeed in whatever that may be. I don't want you to be held back by this critical voice. I have in the past, and it does no good for my self-esteem, for my self-worth, to let that critical voice have the power in the steps I take in my life. Recognize that critical voice, show compassion, become curious. Think through the root, try to get to the root cause of where that negative thought came from. Maybe it was an experience in the past that hurt you, and your critical voice is just trying to protect you. But make sure that you don't let that stop you from taking the next step, okay? That critical voice is not serving you, but I want you to know that it's a part of you. It's a part of you that you can show grace and compassion to, and an opportune time for you to show some kindness to yourself. Let me go over the 3 steps again. You hear the critical voice. What does that critical voice say? The next step is you become curious. You ask yourself some questions about that critical voice and the history of the negative thoughts that you have in your head. Step number 3, you ask yourself what if questions. What if that critical voice is trying to protect you? What if that part of you is just scared? What if you showed up anyway? What if you showed yourself grace and kindness and compassion and you did the hard thing? You did something that you were afraid of. It's okay to be scared, but it's not okay to let fear of failure hold you back.